All right then, so let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us for Python for Full Stack Web Developers, Turning Ideas into Product. This is session 2. Let's go next slide, introduce our speaker, Katerina. So Katerina Hanson is a senior engineering manager at Kojo, which is a procurement solution startup. She has multiple years of experience managing large product teams, as well as a background in project engineering. She advocates for a balance between agile and waterfall processes for a smooth project workflow with visibility. And Katerina, I'll hand the microphone over to you.
Yeah, okay. So I want to kind of go over the story so far, a little bit of a recap from session 1. Basically, we're going to be working on a open source menu and ordering system that can tie into, delivery apps, client apps. The intention is for this to be a single tenant backend with peer-to-peer discovery so that we don't have to host anything ideally. This is the kind of like stripped down MVP. It's going to be very simple, but it's going to be something that kind of like demonstrates how to get a project moving and started, and then get to a useful place. So we're going to be eventually, not today, but we're gonna do an admin client, and that's going to be the only front end that I'm doing. We're going to do, enter the menus. We want it to be multi-menu, multi-location. We want to have a schedule by location. We want to be able to receive and confirm orders. The restaurants are going to manage the delivery themselves as far as I'm concerned. Payment tracking, we can calculate tips, but at the end of the day, I'm expecting restaurants to pay their own drivers. And customer service is going to be like strictly a phone number. So I'm not doing customer service, but you can call the restaurant and be like, hey, I ordered from you. And I'm deferring for now the user client and delivery driver client because it's open source and we're going to have an API. Other people should be able to build clients on top of the API and potentially just use that. And I'm not going to handle payment extensions right now, mostly because I don't know what restaurants use. And I'm assuming that at some point they'll either use the open source project and build their own payment integration, or somebody will tell me, hey, we really need this. And then I'm probably going to defer the DNS lookup and search decision for now, just to make it a little bit easier. So the references, these are project references. So this is the basic structure of what we're kind of looking at. We're going to be building this restaurant server and the admin client. And then we're going to have, there's going to be a backend RDS Postgres database. We want access to S3 so that people can post their images. And eventually we also want access to an email service so we can send off notifications, as necessary. Hey, we got your order. This is the process flow diagram. Fairly straightforward. You're going to want, as the user, to go looking for your menu, select the foods, add it to a cart, check out, get a confirmation email. The restaurant makes the food, sends out the delivery driver confirms. Maybe you add an additional tip, get charged, and receive an email receipt. And then as far as the admin side of things go, I'm assuming that there's going to be somebody who's going to log in to the admin client, enter in all the information, enter in the menu and menu item information, set up the schedule and say, okay, that one's good to go. All righty. And so then this is the model diagram that we came up with the last time. And so far, I have implemented, as an example, to play with, everything prior to the orders. So the basic menu models. And so orders, clients, deliveries, drivers, still yet to go, but kind of started on this side. And then this is the database spec. Fairly simple, straightforward, but basically, you know, enough information, yes, enough information to understand like what columns we're kind of looking for on a table by table basis. I have like a couple of notes there on whether or not I think something should be optional, or, you know, an enum or a Boolean, but otherwise, if it was fairly obvious, I did not necessarily call it out, but typically in a technical spec, I'm looking for kind of like things like this, where you might have, you know, like a high level description. I don't need, you know, in-depth details, but I need to understand that, you know, the engineer in charge of the project has kind of like thought out at least, you know, the interworkings of some of this. So yes, each of these boxes represents a table in the database or a model in the Django client. And Django is, it's not a data mapper. It's the other one. Django's ORM basically maps a model to a table, rather than something like SQL Alchemy that your model is independent of how you store it. Nope, wrong direction. Okay. So, setting up the application. The goals of this session that I had was to run the project locally on localhost with a local database, migrated with an initial set of models. I wanted to check out Django's built-in admin just to see whether or not it was going to be useful. I want to have enough seed data to play with as we develop it, and then ideally deploy a project to a development server safely. That didn't happen, not 100%, but I got pretty close. So I'm going to go over some of that. So I did an initial how to set up a skeleton set of documentation in the project repo. In general, I'm going to use Docker. And so it would be good to install Docker on your system if you haven't already. And then basically GitHub, make sure you set up your SSH keys. If you're setting up your own skeleton, you would start with a blank repo, you know, for your own projects, not this project. But if you wanted to follow along and do your own project, you have to set up your repo, clone the empty repo into your project directory, and kind of follow along with the instructions in the project repo. So I'm going to see if I can exit out of this for a second and we can play with some of what I had set up. Okay. This is not what you should be looking at, not to start. Okay, so to start, I have a skeleton set up that is partially in Markdown and partially viewable. But basically what I did, and it's potentially optional whether or not you have a virtual environment locally, but I basically always do a virtual environment for each one of my projects. And so install virtual env, make sure that you have Python 3 installed, check to make sure you've got it added to the path, create a virtual environment in the project. I always put my virtual environment in a git ignore so that it doesn't actually accidentally end up getting committed. And then you can activate your virtual env with basically a source env bin activate. And then if you want to deactivate it, you literally just type deactivate in your terminal. And then you're going to want to install Django and Django REST framework for this pattern of project. And then it's really straightforward at that point. Anytime you add a Python package to pip freeze into your requirements.txt file. And yeah, after that, I set up a Docker file. And so the Docker file for development is basically just in the root of your project. So this guy right here. And this is literally like a development Docker file in order to launch like a basic Django project. So I started with Python 3.9. First, I copy the requirements.txt file over, and then run pip install in the requirements.txt file. Then after that, I made like a random project directory, and this could be named literally anything. And change into the project directories folder, and then copy everything else into that project directory. And that's basically it for the Docker file for your local environment. One of the reasons why I don't just copy everything over initially is that Docker, as you're running it, it kind of remembers steps. And if nothing has changed in that step, then it won't rerun. So if you're not going to be changing your requirements that often, which it's, usually less often that you're going to change your requirements and reinstall, then it's going to go faster as you run it the next time. After that, because I also want a little development Postgres straight on my computer, straight in the Docker, I'm going to create a Docker Compose. And so this is what the Docker Compose file looks like, and it's got some interesting things in it. So it's version 3.9, and it's very important to have a version at the top of your Docker Compose file. And then it basically defines the services. And we're going to have two services for this project. We're going to have the web and the database. And because this is local, I am not too worried about database secrets and users. I'm just putting something in here for now. And, it'll work. So the web, basically, we're going to build this project. And then we're going to run python manage.py run server, and we're going to run that on the 8000 port. The volumes here basically says files in here should stay up to date with, like, files in the project folder that we had defined in the Docker file should stay up to date with the files here. And yeah, Docker is basically it's a type of virtual environment that is very portable. And so I, as a developer, don't have to worry too much about whether you're on a Linux machine, a Windows machine, or a Mac machine. It's just going to create you like a virtual environment that is going to run on your computer, and it basically solves the problem of, well, this worked on my computer. Why isn't it working on your computer? The other fun thing is that you can deploy Docker containers to remote environments as well. And so it makes it pretty easy to move from, like relatively easy to move from a local environment to a prod environment without having a lot of things break in the interim. So yeah. So we're also going to stand up a little temporary database. And what this is doing is basically it's going to Docker Hub, and it is pulling down an image that is named Postgres version 15.3. And it's a pre-built image that somebody put together. They basically started with some version of a VirtualBox, and they made sure that Postgres was installed on it. And the instructions are basically like, how do you get it running? You have to provide it with environment variables. So Postgres user, password, database, a port mapping. This is Postgres usually ends up on port 5432. But I'm going to go ahead and map it locally to 5433 because I also kind of tend to use Postgres locally. So if I don't want it to conflict with any Postgreses that I might have run locally. And then I also gave it a volume that we call PG data. And that's basically like, where is it? Like, where's it kind of like storing volumes, keeping the volumes up to date. And so that was like a little extra. And I'm not 100% convinced that I need that, but it worked with it. So yeah. So this basically is the definition of the two services that I want to use together locally on my computer. After that, it was basically a matter of Django admin start project. And I call the project server, and this dot after the fact turned out to be somewhat necessary because Django will kind of nest your project, but if you put a dot in it, then it works in an existing project. Now, most of the time, the stuff that is going to be generated with the project could be regenerated without really too many issues. So you get things like ASGI is basically setup. You get a settings file. And this is like all of the little different tweaks and everything that you're going to be making to your Django project. Some of these, like, you really do need to set up. And so I went into the databases and I made sure that it's going to have Postgres and my password and my database and what port it's on. And because Postgres here is running inside the container, it's going to be looking for 5432. I didn't really touch much of this, like much of these other things, but I did touch installed apps in order to add a couple of extra dependencies. I'm going to be using Django extensions and Django filters. And then SRC is actually what I called my app. So if we go back here, I ran python manage.py start app source. And so then I added that to the installed apps. The other thing is allowed hosts. Django has like a final little security filter where there's only a few different hosts allowed. And so just for kind of completeness, I gave it localhost 12.0.0.1. All right. Yeah. And then this is kind of like the setup for the Docker container. I did need to install Psycho PG2, which is a dependency in the code in order to be able to talk to Postgres, but we're not actually going to use this directly. That's just to support Django's database plugin. And so, yeah, with that in place, we should be able to run Docker compose up -- build. So let's cross our fingers. All righty. So one of the things we're going to go look at is our Docker desktop. And we should be able to see in Docker desktop that I've got Women Who Code full stack web dev container. And that's the logs for the container. And then we've got web, and then we've got db-1. And so, you know, there it is, it's up and running. So at least the Docker container is looking pretty good. Or at least running. So one of the things that we can also do right now is I really like to use like a UI tool in order to connect to my Postgres databases. So I think I've got this one. This one's the one that I had with localhost. And this is not right. Yeah, no, this is fine. So I already made this database, but one of the things that I did here from previously is I set up a series of makefile commands. And this is a little silly. This is potentially an affectation of mine that I learned from previous companies, but I kind of really like makefiles for giving a sense of the commands that you have to run, and it's basically aliases. But if you are if you're kind of running a project and you just want, you know what you have to do, you're going to run these same commands over and over again, or you want to kind of communicate them with other people, I find a makefile kind of easy to do that. It's basically just a little syntax where you do the command name, you do a tab, and this has to be an actual tab, which is a little fun for Python, but you have to make sure that your file is set to actually give you real tabs. And then you can just list off the commands afterward. And that way, when you run, I'm just going to kill this altogether. When you want to run these commands, you basically just say make. So in the spirit of, I want to be able to start up a web service and tear it back down again and like throw it away if I mess it up and start completely over. I can basically do something like make nuke. And that's just going to go ahead and run the commands to take the Docker image that we just made down, remove the volume, remove the image, tear it all down. When I go back here, you can see it's gone. The image, these are probably from previous ones, but we can basically delete anything that doesn't have anything, and the volume should be, yeah, like 2 years old. So we're fine. So it's gone. We can start all the way over from fresh. And then here we can do make init. And we should get the exact same thing kind of back up. We've got some containers running here. This little -d runs it in the background, so we're not going to get stuck in, terminal land there again. But here we go. It's back. I've got my web one, my database one. That's nice. Let's take another look at this. Should be my local Postgres. They shouldn't exist. I think I have connected to the wrong one. Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to go ahead and fix this. So it is localhost. Pretty sure this is on 5433, and our user is Postgres, and this is the password, and the database is restaurant. Okay, here we go. That's better. All right. So as you can see, completely empty database. Much better, because we haven't actually run a database migration yet. So if we then go back to our makefile with the useful commands that I made, the next thing that we actually want to run is Docker compose exec web. So we're gonna Docker compose execute on the web container Python manage.py migrate. So make migrate. And you can use tab to get into the make things. All righty. So what that's going to run is basically all of the migrations in Docker, plus the migrations that I've added as part of working through adding models to the project. So for reference, if we go back here and do a refresh, we've got a number of different, we've got our database tables. And these database tables are completely blank. There is nothing in them, but the structure is there. So we're doing pretty good. All right, let's go take a look at what I did here. So we had all of our definitions kind of already laid out. So this was basically a matter of, I moved the models.py folder in models.py file into a folder called models, just to keep everything nice and organized. And I used the spec that we laid out in the presentation to create a set of models. And basically what we're doing here is literally a class pulling from Django's models.model, which is, it's just provided models.model. And then we give it the name. I also gave it the name of the table because I didn't like how I didn't like what it called the table the first time. It basically strung together server underscore and then the table name. So I'm just going to force it to be a top level location table. And then we've got each of our fields. And this is fairly straightforward. We've got character fields. Image field was interesting. We can now use an image field type and upload straight to logos. And logos is a folder that I added to a folder in the media folder. So I had to make a directory media, make a directory logos, and then if the user uploads a logo, it's going to end up in that folder locally. The media folder had to be registered in settings.py. So it's worth remembering to, set a static URL and a media URL and a media root as necessary as you're kind of working through things. But settings.py kind of gets updated as you're working with Django a lot. All right, so text fields, datetime fields. Datetime fields are fun because you can basically, tell it to auto add like now at different points. So if it's created, it gets an auto now add, and if it's updated at, it gets auto now. So the auto now add is only on adding. Auto now gets updated every time, so that is correct. And then deleted at is going to start off null and blank by default. And I like to add created at, deleted at, and updated at fairly widely, because I find it very useful to have the ability to soft delete things and understand when a particular row was created and updated at. It also helps for eventual data pipelining and other things. Like, it's a very useful thing to just kind of sprinkle liberally among your tables. Couple of other things to note. Decimal field for price, because price should never be floats. Never, never, never. Floats do not get the precision that you need to express a decimal, and you'll end up eventually with rounding errors. So if you ever need something to be accurate to the penny, particularly if you're going to do math on it, like multiplying it times a quantity, you should always be working in decimals. We've got a foreign key. So the menu item has a foreign key here to our menu section table. And then the model, the menu model itself has a many-to-many field to the menu item. And you can kind of see like the menu item doesn't actually have a reference in this definition right now anyway to menu, but we gave it a related name, menus. And so hopefully in the ORM later, we'll be able to refer to the menus from the menu item or the menu items from the menu, kind of back and forth. I decided that I'm going to use CUIDs for the primary key IDs on basically everything here, because they're kind of short. They're not too long. The collision is acceptable, and it's not necessarily auto incrementing 1, 2, 3, 4. So like it's just kind of like a nice future proofing way to do an ID. All right. And then one of the fun things that you can do with Postgres, particularly, is there's some kind of like exotic fields that you're not going to get in MySQL. And one of those is an array field. The other one is really a JSON field. And that can be really nice if you don't necessarily want, if you don't want to have to abstract out a particular field to a table for normalization, but you just kind of need like the flexibility of an array or a dictionary in your model. You can use one of these kind of like array fields or JSON fields. So I'm using an array field for the days of the week. And really, in this sense, what I'm attempting to do, and I'm not sure I got it, what I'm attempting to do is have the choices be one of the days of like in day abbreviations. So like Mon, Tu, Wend, Thurs. We can kind of see it here. All right, I'm gonna get back into my, and then if we do just like Python, get a little Python here, we can like kind of test it out. So day abbreviations is coming from my validator file. And we're just going to import calendar. And then if we list calendar dot day ABBR, that's going to be the object. And so we do have to wrap it in that list to view it. So these are the choices that I want to support for that particular field. And so I added this validator, which is validate the days of the week. So if you enter in a value and you enter in something wrong, it's just going to throw an error. And if you enter in the same day twice, it's going to throw you an error, which is kind of fun. And you should never see these errors because it should be able to be handled on the front end, but we're only building the API. So we want to make sure that anybody who's building against it has a little bit of, indication of what's going wrong. So we're going to throw some errors. And then I did a custom save on the schedule model, which is just going to go ahead and sort those days of the week as it's inserting the days of the week into the database. And it's going to sort it according to the day abbreviations order as well. Yeah. So that's kind of like the start of the models. We had a whole other section of models, but that's the basic pattern for standing up your database. All right. So as fun as that was, I find it's always really useful to have seed data to play around with. And so for that, I have back in the makefile done a seed data command. And so what this is going to do is run Docker compose exec web. You kind of have to put Python. Anytime you want to run a Python command in your Docker command, it gets this whole prefix. Manage.py run script make seed data. And so I basically set up that Docker extensions module to be able to find make seed data.py. It's going to be, you can run anything in the scripts folder with that command, with a manage.py run scripts. So this is literally just going to run create fake set from my source tests seed data, and it is going to run this, which is going to create a full fake set of a fake location, 2 menus, and then for each menu, it's going to create a fake schedule, and a fake menu section. And so the fake schedule that we can kind of see, I pulled in Faker, which is a randomizer test, project. And then you can use Faker as like fake, and basically just kind of like prompt it with a whole bunch of different options to give you semi-realistic looking data. Now, one of the things that I did in addition was I gave it some sample data that I also wanted to select from. And so this is like sample menu items in particular, because I want that to be fairly realistic so that we can kind of see what that is going to look like. And I gave it a short description of potential sample menus. Maybe somebody wants to do a Valentine's Day menu and have it only be active on Valentine's Day. Well, that would be useful. If we were generating seed data to occasionally see a Valentine's Day menu, or, daily brunch dinner. These are not going to make a whole lot of sense together because we are kind of like randomizing it. But if we just do now make seed data, we can even run that a few times to get a few different sets. And we can go back over to our database. And now we've populated those database fields with some nice seed data. So this is what a schedule table with some filled in data might look like. Menu sections, we've got desserts, side order drinks. That's real nice because we're not getting uniques. I mean, we're getting uniques. There's no duplicates here. Menu to items. This is our linking table. So we're linking our menu ID to our menu item ID. Here's our menu items. So we've got chocolate chip cookies. We've got that listed twice with 2 different prices. It looks like it was created close to the same time. If I go by created at, let me see whether or not I can see. Yeah, it looks like we're maybe allowing for multiple multiple of the same name on the same menu is my guess. I do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different menus though. So yeah, maybe not, a little hard to visualize right here. And then we've got the locations here. And Postico is really useful because you can go and you can just like write SQL queries against your database to test it out as well. So that's fairly straightforward here. So we can, query this if we wanted to dig into it a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, so that's the like farther back end database stuff. What happens if we want to go to our local host here? So Django should be running on localhost 8000. Any clues? It's built, it's running, should be running. Context ROOR is missing. Context root. Yeah, I don't have anything on root right now. Yeah, no, I'm just not getting it. Okay. Connect to the server. Is the server running DB host and accepting TCP IP on? Should be. Okay, well, this obviously needs a little bit more work. I got the database up and running so far, but the API is having trouble connecting to it. And I haven't changed anything in the file since the last time I did this, so that's a little fun. 5432. Should be 5432 in here. And we saw it 5433 outside of the thing, so that should work. All right. Not that I really have anything in here to go do in particular. I did update the settings file. So that could do it. All right, I'm gonna get rid of this right quick. Should be able to reference the database based on that. I'm going to go ahead and rerun make a knit because I did change the settings file, so I'm not 100% sure that it's going to get it. All right, just watching for file changes. There we go. That's better. All right. So I have a health check available in the URLs, which is basically just going to return status okay if it's okay. And then I turned on the admin section of this so we could go poke around on that a little bit. I do need a username and a password. So one of the other fun make file commands that I added is make create super user. All right, root, sure. And then I'm just gonna yeah, it's too common, too bad. Cool. We're going to do root and the terrible password that I just put in. And so we can see this is Django's admin page. It kind of like gets auto-generated, and you can add your, your tables to it. But it's kind of clunky. It's not that great. I will say, like, you can add, look at the menu section, and it's the name's dessert. Okay. You can save and add another one. Up. The toast section. So like it works, and it works for like maybe one or two things, but it's not really very good at representing, relationships and making sure that you can view everything. So this is basically why it's really not what you want to be showing to your end user. But yeah, it's there in case you need it, is basically what we've got here. All right. So after this, what are we going to do? Actually going to take a look at the API design. So let me show the slideshow again. Nope. All right. API design. All right. So for RESTful APIs, you kind of always want to consider CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. Your models should almost always have a full CRUD, in my opinion, if the user is going to be entering in data. If you're going to be providing the data, then it's probably going to be read only, in which case you would not need the CUD. But if the user is going to be entering in data, I can promise you they're going to want to update something. They're going to want to delete something anytime they create something. So I would say almost you don't want to save time by not providing a full CRUD interface to the user. So for our models, do any of these, and feel free to post in the comments, kind of thinking about them, do any of these offhand not need the full create, read, update, delete?
Maybe you want to give an example, Katerina, of like what it would look like if it did do that for section?
For section, if you added a section for breakfast and you spelled it wrong, you might want to update it. And if you decided that you're no longer offering wine, but you had a section in there, you might want to delete it. I feel like location might be fairly rare to have to delete a particular location, but you can always mess up. And you can always, put a location out of business. You're not managing it anymore through this. You might want to delete it.
So this is a trick question, is what you're saying.
It's a little bit of a trick question. The ones that I came up with were actually location. Sorry, I'm not going to click. Location should probably be read for everybody but the admin, as well as menu item section schedule. So those are all going to be read by the end client. But if you're an admin, then you're going to want the full create, update, delete. So those should be behind a permissions flag. But they should have the whole CRUD. Order probably should not be able to be fully deleted. I would even argue like a soft delete on an order, you might not necessarily want. But I think orders, keeping track of your orders and things that, people are requesting from you, you might have it by status, you might have closed, you might have canceled, but, you might have a bit of a, issue if you're allowing people to delete orders. And deliveries is probably another one that you don't want people to be able to kind of willy-nilly delete. So hard delete versus soft delete is basically, if you hard delete it, you're clearing the row out of the database altogether. The row is gone. You can't get it back. If you soft delete it, you basically set that deleted at flag, that deleted at timestamp, and then you can infer that that is a deleted row, and you can filter out anything with a deleted at to show it. But like the data is still there on the back end. So a lot of times that is what you'll do is you'll soft delete something just in case somebody's like, oh no, I really want that back.
I feel like Katerina, that's like, I need that for real life.
Exactly.
Where's like my undo button or reset to my last save?
Yep. Now, that being said, for clients and drivers, that is personal information. And one of the things that, it would be nice to be able to support is privacy concerns. So GDPR is a regulation that came out of Europe and said basically like, hey, if you have personal information and the user says, I want you to delete anything you have on me, you have to be able to fully delete it. So no soft deletes allowed. Now, there's a strong likelihood that, this may never be used in Europe, but also it might be used in Europe. I have no idea whether or not somebody in Europe would be interested in downloading my little project. California has its own rules. Canada has its own rules. GDPR is by far the strictest. So if we are GDPR compliant, then we'll be relatively safe with all of those. Yep. So yeah, we've got a few different kind of API specs requirements that we could kind of work on. All right. Anything special we want to add to the API? The other fun thing you can do with RESTful APIs is just give it additional functionality above and beyond the basic model, create, read, update, delete. And just kind of thinking about it, menus, we're probably going to want to check to make sure that the menu is in fact active today and at the time that you are at. Orders, it might be necessary to calculate the price. That would be a nice little function. Making a payment. I mean, eventually we're going to have a API endpoint that takes payments, adds tips, probably something to send a notification on one-off. And then obviously the full get search restaurants, restaurant peers. It might be really awesome to generate a map for the driver. This is where you're going. And that could kind of be doable with like a third-party API. I don't know if that would have to go through the backend, but maybe. So One of the things that I will do for every project that I'm about to start is do a work breakdown. So let me see if I've got it. The goal of a work breakdown is to basically list all of the tickets that you think are going to be needed for the project, size them, and make a schedule. And the schedule can be rough. Honestly, most of the time, my Gantt charts and schedules are more for resourcing than for anything else, and to kind of understand dependencies and where, like, how fast can we get something out if everything goes perfectly. And so they're not bad for estimates, and then for tracking against once we've got enough detail to see whether or not we're running that project on schedule or not. This is a little tool that I use. It's called Tom's Planner, and I love it, and I've signed up for it, and I have just myself a permanent subscription for it. But the reason why I love it is that it's really, really easy to add tasks and schedule out sizes of things and add dependencies and just get a really clear understanding of the project schedule. So for example, let's say on the back end, we've got some tasks here. We want to finish the models. I think that's probably going to take me about 2 days. Create serializers for those models. I'm going to add a dependency here. I got to create the models first before I create the serializers. I want to set up filters. That's going to have to come after that. And if I'm like, okay, you know, that might be the first thing that I work on, but it could also be something I work on later. So I can just slide the whole group around. And it's just super quick to kind of play with. We are making an API documentation endpoint, so it would be really good to add Swagger to that. I've added Swagger to a project once in my career, and it was a bit of a pain. So I'm going to guess that adding Swagger is probably going to take a little longer than that. Permissions. Django's actually got some good permissions, so I think that one might be easier to do, but it's probably going to need a lot of testing. So you can kind of just play with that. And then like, oh, I've got 2 things assigned to the same backend person at once, and that's like an indication that maybe this needs to be pushed out. Or maybe I need to assign this to somebody else. Then I can pull it back in. Django's also pretty good with user sign-in, but it's still going to take some time. And we're probably going to have to support, like, you know, a little bit there. So maybe 3 days. Oh, it's going to need plenty of tests, and we're going to have to write a bunch of tests. And emails is templates. Emails is setting up SNS. That's probably going to take some time too. So I found this tool to be super useful for like a project spec work breakdown. And it gives like a really nice view into who's working on what. You don't even have to put like people's names in there, but it's really nice to understand, you know, if I have 5 people who can work on it, well, then I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4 people working on this, then maybe I'll have the capacity to pull something else in. Or maybe I don't want to have 4 people working on completely disparate things, and I want to push this one out so that I can have just like 2 people working on it. Yeah. All right. So kind of finally, as like just a last little deal here. I did go ahead and start adding serializers. Let me see. Okay, so I added the serializers to the serializers.py in the models folder. This is REST framework. A serializer is basically saying what the representation of the return value to the API is going to look like. This is a fairly broad definition of a serializer. I basically just used the full model serializer. It's probably not where we're going to end up with, but for visualization and for playing with it and for writing a friend in on it, it's going to have basically too much data. And so we can kind of start here and then think about it and kind of pare it down after that. And because it's like all the same and very consistent, it's really easy to set up all your serializers. And then in the views, we have basically this model view set, which is a full CRUD for everything. And the only two things that we really have to define are the serializer class and the query set, and we're just going to return everything to start. And so that's like another kind of just shorthand to get stuff up and running. All right. So yeah, this should start to get us pretty well on the path to being able to hit our API and start looking at test data, and have a whole little Docker container locally that we can play with and get our end product working on. And I'm going to hold off on getting this out to deployment until next time.
Oh, that's great, Katerina. Great job. Any questions from the audience? I know someone was asking before about sharing a slide deck, but do you have a GitHub repo or other links so people can follow
along? Is a
GitHub
repo. This is the GitHub repo that I started. So I'll be able to share this in the Slack channel.
Okay. That's awesome. It'd be fun to really integrate. A lot of people are saying thank you in the chat. But Chief, thanks so much for sharing, providing context, and generally demystifying a lot of this for noobs. So much. Great session. Thanks so much. Thank you. Oh, you're so awesome, Katerina. It's like you did a really great job, like, I guess what's the word, distilling and synthesizing all this like dense context information.
Yeah.
And people can follow along afterwards for working along, setting up their own stuff for the next session. Anything else they need to prepare or get ready if they want to follow along with you?
Well, I will say right now, this is a public repository. It is open source. If you want to submit a pull request against it, feel free. If you want to, like, you at this point know what the models are, if you want to play around with like submitting a pull request against a repo, you should be able to stand up the instance locally and try it out. But yeah, I am taking pull requests.
Okay.
So I'm happy to do, code review. Yeah, anything that you think of that can make it fun and better would be well appreciated.
Sounds great. And if other people have like maybe other ideas, like now we're like, getting the little like cogs in the brain working of everyone if they want to like do their own app. Maybe something they had in mind. So that's like delivery, could do plant delivery. I know we discussed that, Katerina, like getting our plants. Our plants. Our little like black bean thumbs, but yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the same process over and over again at the end of the day.
Like getting kind of like customers, the business and getting stuff there. Yeah.
This would get you a prototype for your idea that you could then show to people and be like, hey, this is my idea. And it won't do damage to future engineers who want to work on it. So like that's my main goal, is like kind of piecing together a rational framework for standing up something that could potentially grow.
Yeah, and it's a fun project to add in free time or add to your resume, or just something
Yeah.
fun to work on at work.
By all means, if you know, if you help me out and somebody's like, oh, I helped you build this, like, you can send them my way and be like, hey, you know, yeah, they helped on my open source project. It was great.
They're perfect for like Hacktoberfest, but I think that's October, so but plenty of
Mhm.
time. It's always fun to do open source projects.
Yeah.
I think I guess we'll wrap it up. There's no more questions. There was a lot of thank yous, Katerina, but yes, thank you again, Katerina, so much. Awesome session and the great content, and you'll be sharing slide deck afterwards, and we'll be sharing recording on YouTube. And yeah, we'll see everyone again in 2 weeks. Let's see, today's the 13th. See, I'm looking at my calendar. So that would be June 27th, Tuesday, same time.
Yep.
That's great.
Awesome.
right. Wish everyone a great rest of the week and rest of June. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Have a great rest of the week. Okay, bye.
Bye.